Your Utopia is the brand new science fiction short story collection by Korean author Bora Chung. You'll probably know the name Bora Chung from this. Cursed Bunny, translated into English by Anton Hur and published by Honford Star. I reviewed this book a few years ago when it was first published, and it needs no introduction. Cursed Bunny took the world of literature by storm. People are obsessed with this collection of stories, and rightly so. These are very diverse tales that lean into the horror. A lot of them are scary in different ways. Body horror, curses, ghosts. But there are also stories of science fiction, fantasy, and fairy tales in here. In that way, it does kind of feel like a fairy tale collection, a diverse selection of moralistic and sometimes hilarious stories from various different genres, leaning into the creepy, leaning into the scary. Cursed Bunny remains an amazing collection, and now we have its follow-up. Also translated by Anton Hur and published by Honford Star. But Your Utopia is different from Cursed Bunny in the sense that it is purely science fiction. Every story in here can be classified as sci-fi, but in no way does that fact limit what is on offer here. Because Bora Chung's writing is still all about diversity. Diversity of emotion, diversity of themes and ideas and imagination, and all of that is on display here in a very imaginative science fiction collection. I do think I'll get my one negative out of the way right now, which is really simple. This is a short story collection, and the very first story in it is the only one I really didn't like. I did not connect with this story at all, I did not care about it, and I found it entirely uninteresting. The story is called The Center for Immortality Research, which just based on that title sounds really interesting, but unfortunately that story did not captivate me in any way and kind of soured me and made me worry that this collection was gonna be a flop. Cursed Bunny was a revelation. As I said, it shook the world of literature. People are obsessed with Cursed Bunny. And then this starts off with a dud? I was worried. But honestly, every other story in here is an absolute banger. There was one misfire, in my opinion. You might disagree. And everything else is excellent. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my favourite stories in here and why they're my favourites. Most of the stories in this collection average about 20 to 30 pages in length each. But the longest story in here is the second one. It's called The End of the Voyage, and it's about 50 pages long. The End of the Voyage is the one story in Your Utopia that leans towards the horror. It's still very much a science fiction story, but there are some horror elements, and also some kind of darkly funny ones too. Bora Chung often injects humour and satire and wit into her stories. That humour is often very dark, and certainly not to everyone's tastes, but it is very much my sense of humour. There's nothing like the very first story in Cursed Bunny, I think it was called The Head. That is a darkly funny story. But The End of the Voyage definitely has a few dark moments that will make you laugh and feel a little guilty about it. The End of the Voyage tells the story of a virus that has broken out across Earth. It started with a family in Iowa, and now it's everywhere. And the only thing that this virus does is turn people into cannibals. Once you're infected with it, you get the taste for other people. And it starts with a boy in a school in Iowa just reaching over to try and take a bite out of one of his classmates. His whole family are infected with this virus, and it spreads really quickly. The story is primarily set on an Ark ship that has set off into the cosmos, away from Earth, to get away from this cannibalism virus that has spread across the planet. But the virus is on board the ship, and so the ship slowly falls into complete chaos and terror. The captain gets infected, the first mate gets infected, and we're following one character who is trying to survive. It's a harrowing tale. It will remind you of a lot of more horror-leaning sci-fi stories like Alien or Event Horizon, or even 2001. And the final line of this story sent a chill down my spine, but also made me smile. It was kind of a terrifying line, but one I really enjoyed being scared by. That's the tone that Bora Chung manages to settle on so often with her stories, and it's amazing how she does it. Another really sweet story from later in the book is called A Song for Sleep. Our protagonist is an elevator in a residential building, an apartment block. This lift has full artificial intelligence, and it starts to fall in love with a very elderly woman who sometimes gets a ride in the lift in and out of the building, in and out of her apartment. The lift becomes fascinated by her, enamored with her. She's like 95 years old. She reaches out and she touches the walls of the lift, looking for the buttons because that's what she's used to, but this is decades in the future where you tell the lift where you want to go and the lift goes there. And this lift's consciousness is falling in love with this woman. He learns about her favorite music and he asks this internet ether database information about the things that she liked and the things that she grew up with and things that she understood back in her day. It's really sweet and charming. It's very, very short and it had me smiling the whole way through. The title story, Your Utopia, is also about an artificial intelligence. This time it is a sentient car that is driving around an empty, abandoned Earth. Humanity is gone. Our car is solar powered and so is able to survive and just keep on driving until these power cells start to fail. But the car isn't alone. It has a companion, a kind of android that used to work in a hospital. Based on what the android says, and it only has what seems like limited consciousness, or certainly limited vocabulary, it must have worked as a robot that monitored human satisfaction, human comfort, human pain levels, that kind of a thing, because it repeatedly asks people how they're doing and tells them their utopia level. Over and over again, it says the phrase, "Your utopia is," and then gives a kind of numerical value. Our car is very much affected by that. The car is constantly thinking about what its utopia is. It just wonders. It thinks back to its human owner. It wonders about where this android came from that just sits in the back seat as they journey around this empty place. And the story ends with what I could only call a boss fight, which is strange and exciting, and I really, really enjoyed it. It's a very, very charming tale. Perhaps the most surreal and satirical and hilarious story in here is Seed. Seed is told from the perspective of a grove of trees. All different trees of different types. It's clearly set sometime in the future, and these trees are having a meeting with 5 humans, 3 men and 2 women who all look entirely identical. The word eugenics is never used, but that's the idea. These people were clearly selected and designed before they were even born. They all look exactly the same in a very eerie sense. It really reminded me of Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. And the reason this grove of trees is having a conversation with these humans is because the trees are accidentally invading other spaces by spreading their seeds around, germinating and pollinating and doing what trees do. And the humans are here with their clipboards to talk about land and border disputes and who's allowed to do what in their land, and that's someone else's land, and your land isn't even clearly defined. Do you live here? Where's your house? I don't see any buildings. The humans are confused by nature, the way that it operates, and the fact that it doesn't operate by weird legal and business standards and business jargon. These humans live by laws, live by rigid boundaries. They don't know how else to think, let alone speak or feel. And they are constantly trying to understand nature and the fact that nature doesn't have rigid lines, but in fact nature just does. It just is. And that baffles these humans. It is a very funny, very satirical, kind of light-hearted, but also a story with a real message that is very, very obvious, as it should be. It's hilarious satire, and I laughed all the way through it while also kind of feeling sad, because it was recognizable in a weird way. And one other story in this collection that I really, really enjoyed, by this point I've reviewed half the stories, maybe more, is A Very Ordinary Marriage, which is another really short story that just tells the tale of a husband. He's been married to his wife for about a year, and he starts wondering and worrying that she's cheating on him because she sometimes takes phone calls in a language he's never ever heard. Like, he has no idea what this language is. Late at night, he overhears his wife in the next room, quietly and privately, talking on the phone to someone in a language that is impossible to recognize. And he doesn't know what's going on, and he assumes that she's cheating with some foreigner. But he didn't know she spoke any other languages, so he also kind of feels like suddenly he doesn't know his wife as well as he thought he did, and so that breaks his heart, as well as the idea that she's cheating. But is she cheating? There's got to be something else going on here, and I won't spoil what the twist is, but it's a lot of fun. Your Utopia proves once again that Bora Chung is a very, very unique, very important, very exciting voice in Korean fiction. She's a master of genre fiction. We know through Cursed Bunny that she writes fantastic fantasy stories and she really excels at horror and twisted dark tales. And Your Utopia proves that she is also a master of science fiction. She's amazing at using genre as a tool to explore different styles of writing, different concepts, themes, and ideas, and also different ways of eliciting an emotional response from the reader, because the emotional spectrum of this book is enormous. It exists on a huge emotional spectrum and spectrum of imagination and possibility. Even though everything in here is science fiction, the breadth of scope here is huge. The fact that you have a very funny satire, the fact that most of these stories are embedded with some humor, but also the fact that it is darkly sad in so many instances. These are stories of love and loss. They're stories of family, they're stories of secrecy and betrayal, they're stories of exploration, of loneliness, and a lot of them have humor in them that will make you feel a little bit uncomfortable or guilty for laughing. That's the cheekiness and the excitement that comes from Bora Chung's writing. There's no one like her, at all, that I've ever read. And every story in here is delivered through Anton Hur's incredible translation. By this point, he is the most famous and successful Korean to English translator there is, and rightly so. Anton is a dear friend of mine, I love everything he does, and I am often in awe of what he writes, of what he translates, and what he chooses to talk about and use his platform for. I'm very grateful to him, just for existing, let alone his incredible skills and his friendship. Bora Chung and Anton Hur are an incredible team. Proof that writer and translator work together to create something very, very special and unique. And Your Utopia is another example of that, just like Cursed Bunny was 2 years ago. Please check it out, support me on Patreon if you'd like to, and subscribe for books.